Welcome to the Radio Revenue Podcast.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, today we are taking on a mission to unpack a really dense, complex, and frankly fascinating document.
Oh, dense is putting it mildly.
Right. We are doing a deep dive into Amgen Inc.'s 2025 annual report, their Form 10-K, which just dropped in early 2026.
Yep.
And if you follow the biotech sector at all, you know these SEC filings are, well, they're notoriously dry.
There's hundreds of pages of legal disclaimers.
Exactly. Tiny financial tables, boilerplate text. But our goal today is to act as your personal guide through all that noise. We are skipping the corporate speak to extract the most surprising, crucial, and high-stakes insights about one of the world's leading biotech giants.
And high stakes is it's truly the defining theme of this entire filing.
It really is.
When you look at the sheer scale of the enterprise in 2025, the numbers are just staggering. I mean, we are looking at an operation that generated $35.1 billion in product sales.
Oh.
And pulling in $7.7 billion in net income.
Which is huge.
Yep. All right, just for context for you listening, that net income figure is nearly double what they reported in 2024.
Double. That's incredible.
It is. But reading through the strategic disclosures, a distinct narrative emerges here. Amgen is walking a precarious tightrope.
How so?
Well, they're pushing the absolute boundaries of scientific innovation, but simultaneously defending themselves against this onslaught of regulatory, legal, and competitive pressures.
Yeah, the drama hidden in this financial reporting is remarkable. Over the course of this deep dive, we are going to look at a highly unusual regulatory stare-down with the FDA.
A literal stare-down.
Yeah, plus the intense race for the next big obesity drug, a massive $1.2 billion balance sheet hit from government price setting, and the ticking clock of legacy patent expirations.
There is a lot of ground to cover.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the core of any biopharma company, the R&D engine.
The lifeblood.
Right. The filing shows Amgen spent $7.27 billion on research and development in 2025 alone. That is a colossal allocation of capital. Where exactly is that money going right now?
A significant chunk of that capital is being directed at the most fiercely competitive frontier in medicine today, which is metabolic health and obesity.
Okay.
The crown jewel of their pipeline right now is a candidate called MariTide, or Maribart cafraglutide, if you want the scientific name.
Right. I noticed they dedicated a lot of ink to the phase 2 results they announced in January 2026.
They absolutely did.
Can you walk us through the actual data they included in the filing? Like, why did the market react the way it did?
Yeah, so they highlighted an exploratory evaluation where patients remained on MariTide for an additional 52 weeks.
And this is following the initial 52-week weight loss phase, right?
Exactly. And the critical finding was that the vast majority of those participants maintained their weight loss for that entire second year.
Even when they transitioned to a lower dose?
Yes, even on a lower monthly or quarterly dose. And just as importantly, the safety profile held up perfectly. No new safety signals were observed during that extended period.
That dosing frequency is a huge commercial factor. But from a pharmacological standpoint, why is this specific drug generating so much buzz compared to, the established therapies already dominating the market?
What's fascinating here is the underlying structural mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
It's fundamentally different from the standard therapies you're seeing prescribed today.
How so?
MariTide is an antibody-peptide conjugate. It works by activating the GLP-1 receptor, which drives the satiety signaling we are all familiar with. But it explicitly combines that with antagonizing or blocking the GIPR receptor.
Blocking it, not agonizing it.
Right. This dual-action approach, specifically the decision to antagonize rather than agonize GIPR, is a highly differentiated thesis in metabolic science.
Yeah, I see.
It is the reason Amgen has initiated 6 distinct global phase 3 studies.
6 of them.
6. They are testing it for chronic weight management in adults with and without type 2 diabetes, but they are also looking at heart failure, established cardiovascular disease, and sleep apnea.
So they are attempting to prove this is a systemic cardiometabolic intervention, not just a weight loss tool.
Precisely. They want to show broad systemic benefits.
Well, speaking of broad cardiovascular intervention, that brings us perfectly to Repatha. The numbers reported for this drug in the 10K are incredible.
They really are.
I saw it hit $3.01 billion in sales. That represents 36% year-over-year growth.
Yep.
For a therapy originally approved back in 2015, seeing that kind of growth acceleration a decade into its life cycle is highly unusual. What was the catalyst there?
The catalyst was a major regulatory win that completely changed the drug's addressable market.
Okay, what happened?
In August 2025, the FDA significantly broadened Repatha's approved label based on the Vesalius-CV trial.
Right, the Salius trial.
Historically, the clinical hurdle was that a patient usually needed an established diagnosis of cardiovascular disease to qualify for the therapy.
Like they already had a heart attack.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the Vesalius trial looked at high-risk adults who had not yet experienced a prior heart attack or stroke.
Oh, wow.
And when Repatha was added to other lipid-lowering treatments in that specific population, it demonstrated a 25% relative reduction in the risk of major adverse cardiovascular events,
That's huge.
and specifically a 36% reduction in the risk of a heart attack.
So they successfully shifted the paradigm from secondary prevention, treating someone after a catastrophic event, to primary prevention.
Precisely. By removing the prerequisite of a prior cardiac event, the pool of eligible patients expanded exponentially.
Makes sense.
And we see a similar aggressive pursuit of outcomes in their oncology pipeline, too.
Right. Imdelltra.
Yes, the filing highlights the full FDA approval for Imdelltra, targeting extensive stage small cell lung cancer.
I saw that. The trial data there showed a 40% reduction in the risk of death compared to standard chemotherapy.
Which is phenomenal.
A 40% reduction in mortality risk for extensive stage small cell lung cancer is a massive leap forward in the standard of care.
It really is, and for you listening, it is crucial to ground these financial metrics in their real-world impact.
Absolutely.
When you're parsing a 10K, it is so easy to get tunnel vision on the billions of dollars in revenue or the R&D burn rate. But these figures represent structural shifts in how the medical community addresses severe systemic disease.
Yeah.
That 40% mortality risk reduction, or the prevention of a quarter of major cardiac events in high-risk patients, that is the tangible yield on that $7.27 billion R&D spend.
It is a remarkable yield. But the brutal reality of the biotechnology sector is that every period of exclusivity comes with a hard expiration date.
The patent cliff.
Exactly, which brings us to a major vulnerability detailed in the report. The filing notes that in February 2025 for the U.S. market and November 2025 for select European markets, the patents protecting their ARING and KL antibodies expired.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
That impacts two cornerstone therapies, Prolia and XGEVA.
To understand the gravity of that expiration, we have to look at their revenue contribution. In 2025, Prolia generated $4.4 billion.
$4.4 billion.
And XGEVA brought in $2.08 billion.
So you were looking at nearly $6.5 billion of top-line revenue.
Roughly 18% of their total product sales, just losing its primary intellectual property barrier overnight.
Right, and management is not mincing words here. The 10K explicitly warns shareholders to model for accelerated sales erosion across these product lines in 2026.
They know it's coming.
But the document also makes it clear they aren't just passively accepting that erosion. The litigation section of this 10K is incredibly aggressive.
Oh, they're fighting it tooth and nail.
They detail a major lawsuit filed in June 2025 against Hikma Pharmaceuticals and another in November 2025 against Amneal Pharmaceuticals, both aimed at blocking proposed biosimilars. They are actively seeking permanent injunctions to halt manufacturing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this litigation strategy highlights a fascinating evolution in how legacy biopharma operates.
What do you mean?
When a biologic loses exclusivity, the market doesn't face generic chemical equivalents, it faces biosimilars. And once multiple biosimilars enter the channel, the pricing dynamics just collapse.
Right, prices tank.
But Amgen's defense mechanism is entirely unique. They are filing injunctions to protect their own legacy assets, yes, but they are simultaneously running a highly aggressive, offensive strategy by manufacturing their own biosimilars to attack competitors' off-patent drugs.
I noticed that. The filing states they have launched 8 of their own biosimilars since 2018.
8 of them.
And just in 2025, they launched Wezlana and BKEMV in the U.S., so they are essentially cannibalizing the broader market to offset their own losses.
It is a masterclass in leveraging infrastructure. Biologic manufacturing requires incredibly sophisticated, capital-intensive facilities.
It's not easy to do.
Exactly. So as Prolia and XGEVA inevitably lose market share and volume drops, Amgen has the excess manufacturing capacity to churn out biosimilars targeting other companies' former blockbusters.
Wow.
They use their scale and supply chain reliability as a weapon to capture revenue in the exact same market dynamic that is eroding their legacy products.
That is a brilliant strategic pivot.
It really is.
But while you can engineer your way through a patent cliff, you cannot easily engineer your way out of a direct conflict with regulators.
No, you cannot.
And that leads us to a section of the 10K that genuinely reads like a corporate thriller.
The FDA stare down.
Yes. It details a major standoff between Amgen and the FDA over a drug called Tavneos, which treats severe active ANCA-associated vasculitis. Now, Amgen didn't develop this internally. They acquired it through their massive $27.8 billion buyout of Horizon Therapeutics.
The acquisition context is critical here. Tavneos was already an approved commercialized asset when Amgen integrated Horizon's portfolio.
Right.
But according to the disclosures, on January 16, 2026, the FDA issued a highly irregular request. They formally asked Amgen's subsidiary, ChemoCentryx, to voluntarily withdraw Tavneos from the U.S. market.
That is wild. Why did they ask for a withdrawal?
The agency's stated concerns centered on how clinical trial data for 9 out of 331 patients had been readjudicated. That, alongside concerns regarding hepatotoxicity, ultimately led them to question the therapy's overall benefit-risk profile.
When the FDA asks a sponsor to voluntarily withdraw a drug, the industry standard is to comply, issue a press release, and just take the financial loss.
You don't fight the FDA.
Exactly. But Amgen did the exact opposite. On January 28, 2026, they officially notified the FDA that they would decline the request and keep the drug on the market.
Unprecedented.
They cited their confidence in the accumulated real-world evidence and maintained that the benefit-risk profile remains favorable.
I cannot emphasize enough how rare it is to see a pharmaceutical company openly refuse an FDA withdrawal request.
Right, because the FDA can make your life miserable.
The FDA holds absolute leverage over a sponsor's broader pipeline. To push back like this is a massive test of Amgen's conviction in their clinical data.
Yeah.
The 10K notes, they're evaluating next steps to determine a regulatory path forward, but this represents a significant ongoing overhang.
Because of the acquisition cost.
Exactly. Remember, they justified a nearly $28 billion acquisition premium based on assets like Tavneos. If they pull it, the ripple effects on the valuation models for that M&A are severe. They're betting heavily that their post-market data can withstand the FDA's scrutiny.
It is a high-wire act for sure, and it highlights how vulnerable these massive revenue streams are to sudden regulatory shifts.
They really are.
Speaking of which, we need to transition into the macro-legislative and geopolitical environment detailed in the report. But before we do, we need to issue a clear disclaimer to you, the listener.
Very important disclaimer.
The legislative bills, executive orders, and pricing mandates we are about to unpack are inherently political in nature. We must explicitly state that we are strictly maintaining complete neutrality and impartiality in this discussion.
Yes, we are not taking sides.
Exactly. We are not endorsing, criticizing, or taking any political position on these policies. Our sole objective is to report the factual, financial, and operational impacts exactly as Amgen has recorded them in this SEC filing.
That is an important distinction to make. We're looking purely at the data and the resulting capital allocation strategies, completely independent of the political landscape driving them.
Agreed.
And the data in this 10K shows that the commercial environment for drug pricing has fundamentally permanently altered.
Altered is definitely the right word. The filing extensively details the ongoing operational impacts of two major pieces of legislation. First, the Inflation Reduction Act. And second, the newly enacted OB3, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was signed into law on July 4, 2025.
Both of those frameworks institute sweeping changes to Medicare and Medicaid pricing mechanics.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The 10K quantifies the immediate direct damage to Amgen's balance sheet.
The impairment charge.
Yes. Because the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services selected their immunology drug, Otezla, for mandatory Medicare price setting scheduled to begin in 2027, Amgen was forced to record a massive $1.2 billion intangible asset impairment charge in 2025.
That impairment charge is a profound signal to the broader market.
It's a huge write-down.
It is. When a company takes a write-down of that magnitude, they are officially acknowledging to shareholders that the future cash flows they previously modeled for Otezla will no longer materialize due to the mandated pricing caps.
Wow.
And Otezla is just the beginning. The filing also notes that Imdelltra is slated for Medicare price setting starting in 2026. This fundamentally breaks the traditional life cycle valuation model for blockbuster therapies.
Because you can't rely on the pricing.
You can no longer assume a stable pricing trajectory through the life of a patent.
And the margin compression isn't just coming from statutory legislation. It is being compounded by executive branch actions.
Right.
The report outlines their compliance efforts regarding a most favored nation's executive order issued in May 2025. And that was followed up by a direct MFN letter sent to manufacturers in July.
The most favored nations policy is designed to peg U.S. drug prices to the significantly lower reference benchmarks paid by other developed nations.
Okay.
The July directive specifically pressured manufacturers to guarantee these lower price points across Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial payers, while simultaneously pushing them to adopt direct-to-patient pricing models.
And Amgen had to respond to that.
According to the 10K, Amgen mobilized quickly to comply. By December 2025, they announced a major expansion of their direct-to-patient infrastructure, dubbed AMGN Now, folding in major assets like Aimovig and AMGEVA.
Right, I saw that.
Furthermore, the filing explicitly states these proprietary offerings are being engineered to integrate directly with the new TrumpRx platform upon its launch.
So they're entirely rewiring their commercial distribution channels to absorb these mandates.
They have to.
And if navigating domestic pricing wasn't complex enough, the filing also details intense global trade friction. It highlights an April 2025 tariff executive order that slapped a 10% universal import tariff on goods.
Yeah.
But Amgen actually managed to secure a massive carve-out.
They did, and the strategic foresight here is commendable. Amgen successfully petitioned for and received a 3-year exemption from those Section 232 tariffs.
How did they manage that?
The 10K attributes this critical relief directly to their aggressive ongoing investments in U.S.-based biomanufacturing. Throughout 2025, they were breaking ground on a new facility in North Carolina while expanding their footprint in Ohio and Puerto Rico.
So by reshoring their supply chain, they completely insulated themselves from that 10% margin hit.
Exactly, but it provides a secondary, perhaps even more vital layer of protection. The filing also discusses the Biosecure Act passed in December 2025. This act strictly prohibits entities from contracting with designated foreign biotechnology companies of concern.
That sounds restrictive.
Very. If a pharma company relies on foreign contract manufacturing organizations targeted by that act, their entire supply chain is suddenly illegal.
Oh, wow.
Because Amgen owns and operates state-of-the-art domestic infrastructure, they bypass the biosecure contracting restrictions entirely. Their capital expenditures on domestic soil acted as a perfect hedge against geopolitical volatility.
It is an incredible display of operational agility. When you look at the totality of this filing, they are balancing $35 billion in global revenue.
It's a massive juggling act.
They are funding massive clinical programs like MariTide. They are defending their legacy franchises against the patent cliff through litigation and their own biosimilar launches. They are openly challenging the FDA over a drug tied to a $28 billion acquisition. And they are completely rebuilding their commercial and manufacturing models to survive historic legislative and tariff shifts.
It's nonstop.
So what does this all mean when you synthesize all of these moving parts from the 2025 10K? What is the ultimate takeaway for the informed listener?
The core takeaway is that in the current era of biotechnology, scientific excellence is merely the cost of entry.
Okay.
Long-term survival requires elite, multidisciplinary risk management. But looking deeply into the operational disclosures in this report, there is one specific detail that points toward a highly disruptive future.
What's that?
The 10K explicitly outlines Amgen's heavy ongoing investment in artificial intelligence and computational evidence to accelerate their drug discovery phase. They are leveraging generative AI to design complex molecules.
Right.
Yet, in the same document, they acknowledge the standard reality of the industry. A typical development cycle still takes 10 to 15 years to move from the lab to commercial approval.
That's a long time.
This raises an important question for you to mull over. If artificial intelligence eventually fulfills its promise and shrinks the scientific discovery phase from several years down to a matter of months, what happens to the global pipeline? Will regulatory bodies like the FDA be adequately resourced to keep pace with an exponential flood of AI-generated clinical candidates?
That's a great point.
Or will that 10 to 15-year bottleneck simply shift from the scientist's bench to the government's desk? And if the regulatory review phase balloons, because agencies are overwhelmed, How will pharmaceutical companies calculate their patent exclusivity windows and return on investment?
Right, because the clock is always ticking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is a looming paradigm shift that could completely upend the financial modeling of the entire sector.
It was a Revenue Radio podcast. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay updated with our latest analyses.